Hey there, Alex Kidman here. Today, taking a look at the Aspera AS5. Aspera Mobile is an Australian company. They don't make their phones themselves, but they're an Australian company. And they specialise in relatively affordable handsets. And that's certainly the most remarkable thing about the AS5, because here in Australia, it'll run you $99 outright. Now, that's budget by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a little hesitant to use the word cheap, because when you say cheap, people often think, oh, that just means it's badly built, there's all sorts of compromises, it's just poor. But no, cheap doesn't have to mean that. Cheap can just mean, hey, I'm not spending quite so much money. And 99 bucks, yeah, you're really not. I would say that a lot of the people who might end up with one of these will probably spend more on the phone plan it's attached to than on the phone itself over the life of the device. But still, $99 is low cost, and low cost often brings with it a whole bunch of compromises. The Aspera AS5 has those, many of which I kind of expected when I took it out of the box, and some of which were not so great, a bit more of a disappointment. Let's get into it. Pulling the Aspera AS5 out of the box felt a little bit like going back in time, because in design terms, this is very much what phones looked like about 8 or more years ago, maybe even longer. It's built around a 5-inch 854 by 480 pixel LCD display, and look, that's not on the sharp side. It's moderately bright, but it washes out pretty easily if you're at an angle, especially in direct sunlight. And you've also got this really thick bezel around the screen. I mean, that's quite an old school design idea. Not bad, but just sort of plain. And look, it's much the same around the back. It's very simple plastic, Aspera logo, camera up the top. All fairly standard stuff. You do get a headphone jack, always nice to see. And then you get the one slightly remarkable thing about this particular phone, something that you don't see just in smartphones generally anymore. And that's the fact that it's got a removable back. Let's see if I can get the back to actually come off the phone. It's not too hard actually on this particular model. And that will reveal the battery, which is also removable. I will get onto that in a little bit. Plus dual SIM card slots and micro SD. Nice bit of expandability there. Kind of surprising and good to see at a $99 price point. Of course, that means, you don't get water resistance, and it's fairly lightly built. It's got a nice light phone in the hand, but it's also not super, super, super durable. Again, though, you're only spending 99 bucks on the thing. So what about the camera? Well, look, in the budget space, the most common way that you cut costs is to incorporate lower-end camera modules. And the AS5 certainly fits that bill in numerical terms. On the back here, it's got a 5-megapixel camera, and on the front, it's got a 5-megapixel camera. Same. And look, that's not spectacular, I suppose. I've relatively recently only just reviewed the Nokia 2660 Flip, a slightly more expensive phone than this that has a 0.3 megapixel camera. So it's better than that, but it's not great. And I expected that. You expect that at this price point. You're just not going to see superb photography out of this particular phone, and I certainly didn't. Any kind of challenge situation saw an awful lot of grain or a lot of blur. It's pretty slow to launch the camera. If camera is really important to you and you're still looking in this budget space, you've probably got to, I would say, double your budget of the AS5 to start seeing any kind of passable results. There's still compromises at play, but they're not quite the compromises that you see here. Still, that's kind of expected for this particular device at this $99 price point. I'm going to come back to that all the time because it really is the remarkable thing about this phone, that it's low cost. Low cost also extends to the processor. So it's built around an octa-core 1.6 gigahertz processor with just 2 gig of RAM. Aspera Mobile doesn't actually say what it is. CPU-Z suggests that it's probably the Unisoc 9863A. That's a somewhat older processor system, but one that's still 4G capable. Not 5G. I mean, 5G just doesn't exist in this price point at this point in time. But it is dual SIM. That's nice to see. So what do you do when you've got a low-spec processor and not much RAM on an Android phone? Well, if you're smart, you throw Android Go on it, and that's exactly what they've done here. Now, if you're not aware of it, Android Go is the ultra-optimized version of the regular Android OS, but it's built for low-power phones, typically for developing markets, but we do see a few Android Go phones here in Australia, especially at this kind of price point, or typically a little bit more, actually. And the thing with Android Go is that you get standard Google Android apps, these ones, with Go optimization, so that they'll work a little bit better on these lower power devices. Now, that doesn't mean that you're just trapped with just these apps. You can try to install anything else that you like, or anything else that's at least going to meet the minimum specifications of the app from Google Play. So, to give that some context, for example, one of the benchmarks that I use will not install on this phone because it just doesn't meet the minimum specification. Other applications will install, but they'll take a while to load. Again, that's just totally expected stuff. That's totally par for the course. This isn't a fast phone. It'll run basic games at a very basic level, and that's kind of what you're paying for. All of that is fine. Not fancy, not great, but fine. Then we come to that removable battery, and I'm going to remove it again, actually, because it's sort of fun to do. It's an interesting selling point, but also because I've got a point to make here. So for an awful lot of Android phones these days, you kind of expect, well, I'll get, say, 4,000, maybe 5,000 milliamp hour battery life. Not this one. Just a 2,000 milliamp hour battery. That's small. It's not high powered, and it's my least favorite feature of the AS5 because it really limits what it can do. Now, obviously, your battery life is quite variable. It depends on what you do. If you don't use this phone a whole bunch, if you just want a contact device with, just a few apps and you're maybe going to check your email on it once a day, yeah, it'll last out a day. If you're a moderate user of any stripe, it almost certainly won't. And to give this some context, I ran the AS5 through my standard YouTube battery test, which grabs a 1080p video. Now, that screen can't do 1080p. Never, ever, ever going to happen. But I ran it for an hour from a full battery. And what I typically look for there is I've put this battery in the wrong way around. I'm doing this live, folks. What I typically look for there is battery life of at least 90% after that hour. And the reason for that 90% is above 90%, it'll typically last out a day on moderate usage. Below it, it usually won't. The Aspera AS5, after an hour's battery testing, only had 67% battery life left. Now, that's a low figure. It's actually the second lowest figure I've ever recorded with this particular test. It's just not good. And it's a big problem if you want this phone and you know that you're going to be on it quite a bit because you're going to be reaching for a charger. Now, on the good news front, you do actually get a charger in the box. You also get headphones too. Always nice to get a few added extras. But on the bad news front, it's micro USB. Now, micro USB, yeah, again, much older standard, less flexible, less common these days than USB-C. I mean, again, I've been doing the AS8, this device's sibling, at the same time. I've been testing it out, and it's USB-C. This isn't. Significantly less convenient. It's something that I would have liked to see bumped to USB-C. It's one of my least favorite features on this particular phone. Seriously would have liked to see USB-C here because it's been a while since I've actually had an Android smartphone with USB-C. You see it in feature phones still from time to time, but it's become a big rarity for a reason. So, should you buy the Aspera AS5? Well, look, the Aspera AS5 is remarkable for its price. That is its core selling proposition. If you just want a very basic phone and you aren't all that fussed about photography or fast app launching, yeah, it'll mostly get the job done. There's no doubt you can get better for not that much more money. And if your budget can stretch to it, then yeah, do so, especially given the Aspera AS5's poor battery performance. But there absolutely is a market for this kind of no-frills phone. I mean, it'd make quite a decent phone for your kids, whether or not you just viewed it as it's very cheap, so if they damage it, it's not so much of a problem. Or actually because of that battery life, if you want to limit their screen time. It'd be one way to do it, I suppose. Equally, if you've got relatives who just want that kind of basic communication phone, maybe a little email checking or light web surfing in the evening, yeah, it'll get the job done. It's not fancy, it's not high-end. The battery life certainly could do with being a bit better, but it's fair value for a $99 phone. Anyway, that's my take on the Aspera AS5. Got any questions? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.